Okay, no one's showing up on stream right now. That's okay. I only have 3 subscribers. They must be watching maybe Vosh's stream or Hassan's stream or maybe just doing something else. Whatever. I'll just stream anyways. So today we're going to be talking about a few things, but mainly we're going to be talking about climate change and the IPCC's report. They're the people who are tracking the climate change. And they're part of the UN. So they're like the official people in charge of tracking climate change and doing reports on it. And, you know, basically the top guys, top people, I should say, on this climate change thing. So they released an article, like a document, 165 pages, some crazy number. But basically it's not good. I didn't read the whole thing, obviously, but from the headlines that I've seen, it doesn't look great. So I just wanted to share with you guys this article, and let's just read it together. Okay, let's get to it. Yeah, we'll read the BBC article first. Is my thing doing correct? Yep. Okay, so that picture, obviously, y'all seeing on the screen right now is the wildfires in Greece, and I'm sure if y'all been following news, it's incredibly scary. Okay. World's largest ever report into climate change will be published later, setting out the stark reality of the state of the planet. The studies by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a UN group that has looked at more than 14,000 scientific papers. Wow. That's a lot of papers, that's a lot of reading. It will be the most up-to-date assessment of how global warming will change the world in the coming decades. Scientists will say it will likely be bad news with nuggets of optimism. Environmental experts have said that it will be a massive wake-up call to governments to cut emissions. So there's a bunch of links here. We'll go through all of these, of course. Last time the IPCC looked at the science of global warming was in 2013, and scientists believe they've learned a lot since then. In the recent years, the world has seen record-breaking temperatures, raging wildfires, and devastating flooding. This is very, very true. Like in my country right here in Canada, we've seen wildfires in northern Ontario, and it was so bad that the smoke literally came south, and there was a point we couldn't even go outside because we would start coughing. That's crazy. And BC, which is to the west of Canada, where I'm on the east coast. Excuse me, that's a burp. On the west coast, there's still wildfires going on. It's been going on for a long time. People had to evacuate. It's chaos. And the heat wave was so bad that it killed over 100 people there. And it killed a lot of animals too. So biodiversity is being wrecked in BC. And this is just the start. So we gotta do something now, or it's gonna be too late soon. Let's get back to the article though. In recent years, the world has seen a record-breaking I've just read that part. What am I doing? Some papers studied by the panel show that some of the changes humans are inadvertently making to the climate will not be reversed for hundreds or maybe thousands of years. Oh wow, that's bad. The IPCC's findings, which will be revealed at a press conference at 9 BST, will also be used during a major summit hosted by the UK in November. The summit, COP26, which is run by the UN, is seen as a critical moment if climate change is going to be brought under control. Leaders from 196 countries will try to meet and try to agree actions. Alok Sharma, the UK minister who's leading the summit, said at the weekend that the world was almost running out of time to avoid catastrophe, and the effects of climate change were already happening. Analysis by Roger Harben, an environmental analyst. The Intergovernmental Panel brings together representatives of the world governments who appraise research by scientists. That means all governments buy into the findings. Last panel was in 2013, and researchers say much has been firmed up since then. Previously, for instance, they were reluctant to ascribe extreme events such as heat waves and torrential rain to be at least partly down to climate change. Now, in the case of the heat dome in the US in June, they are confident to say it would have been almost impossible without climate change. They say the world will continue to get hotter. It will also, especially in Northern Europe, get wetter, though droughts will increase too as weather patterns shift. The panel studied papers showing that sea level would continue to rise for hundreds or possibly thousands of years because of heat already trapped in the ocean deep. Damn. Okay. This is scary. I hope there's some hope here. Research does confirm, though, that if politicians can stick to holding global temperatures increase down to 1.5 centigrade on pre-industrial times, the worst catastrophes can be still avoided. Professor Piers Forster, an expert on climate change from the University of Leeds, said the report will be able to say a whole lot more about the extremes we are experiencing today, and it will be able to be categoric that our emissions of greenhouse gases are causing them, and they're also going to get worse. The report will come with quite a lot of bad news about where we are and where we're going. But there's going to be nuggets of optimism there, which I think are really good for climate change negotiations, he told LBC. One of the causes for optimism he mentioned was that there's still a chance of keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees. Experts say the impact of climate change are far more severe when the increase is greater than 1.5 centigrade. So far, global temperatures have climbed to 1.2 centigrade above pre-industrial levels. The Paris Climate Agreement in 2015 established the goal of keeping the increase in global average temperature to no more than 2 centigrade and trying not to surpass 1.5 centigrade. Temperature rise since 1850. Look at this. Global mean temperature changed from pre-industrial level centigrade. Berkeley Earth, Had Croots, Met Office, Era 5, Temp, NASA, NOAA, JRA 55. So a lot of these different people have targeted. Look, 1850, 1875, 1900, and notice around this time, boom. It starts going up, and at 1975 there's this serious spike. Bang. Right? And it's bad. We're still going up, by the way. So if we go by above 1.5, we are in catastrophic danger. We don't know what the hell is going to happen. This graph is scary. This is our future right here if we don't do anything. Source: Met Office, BBC. Richard Black from non-profit advisory group The Energy and Climate Change Intelligence Unit said, coming just before COP26, this report is a massive wake-up call to all governments that have not yet put forward realistic plans to cut emissions over the next decade. It will show that the choices made now have a big effect on our future, leading to a runaway world of wild weather impacts and incalculable risks at one end, and at the other, a future where climate change is constrained within manageable bounds. This is such a critical moment in the history of our species, of all species on Earth. Like, this is different. Like, I don't know if humanity or the Earth, I mean, maybe the Earth has gone through like 5 mass extinction events. But this is different. You know what I mean? This is completely different. Our species has never faced a crisis like this before. So we're in big trouble, I think. But if we can do something now, the losses will be minimal. Because there are going to be losses because we've screwed up a lot. But hopefully they will be minimal. So what can we expect from the report? According to many observers, there have been significant improvements in the science in the last few years. Our models have gotten better. We have a better understanding of the physics and the chemistry and the biology, and so they are able to simulate and project future temperature changes and precipitation changes much better than they were, said Dr. Stephen Cornelius from WWF, an observer at IPCC meetings. Another change has been that the attribution sciences have increased vastly in the last few years. We can make great links between climate change and extreme weather events. As well as updates on temperature projections, there will likely be a strong focus on the questions of humanity's role in creating the climate crisis. In the last report in 2013, the IPCC said humans were the most dominant cause of global warming since the 1950s. The message in the latest report is expected to be even stronger, with warnings of how soon global temperatures could rise 1.5 centigrade above pre-industrial levels. Experts say the impact of climate change are far more severe when the increase is greater than 1.5 centigrade. Oh, is this a video? Please tell me it's a video. Because sometimes the videos don't happen.
Happening, and that's causing problems which are only set to get worse. Rising sea levels, extinction of species, homes and habitats destroyed by flooding,
Jeez, look at that.
loss of land, famine and drought. The planet is around 1 degree Celsius warmer than it was 160 years ago. Now that might not sound like a lot, but actually that warming is having a big effect on the world around us. And scientists are saying that if we can keep global temperatures from rising by no more than half a degree more by the end of the century, then it's going to be better for us, for the planet, and everything on it. So why is that exactly? Ice sheets and glaciers are already melting. Sea levels are rising, and that means flooding. Low-lying areas such as islands in the Pacific are at risk of disappearing entirely. And many cities like these could disappear beneath sea.
Like, I live in a coastal city, Toronto,
so
this is one of those cities.
Research shows that we're due to sail past this 1.5 degree mark, this crucial time within the next 12 years. By the end of the century, the planet will have warmed by more than twice that amount. If we take steps to reduce global warming to 1.5
We'd all be
degrees,
dead if that happens.
these things will still happen, yes, but the situation won't be nearly so bad. Sea levels will still rise, but not as much as if the world was hotter. Millions more people will avoid having their homes flooded. The number of people who'd experience a lack of water would be halved. Half the world's animals and plant species would be able to keep large parts of their habitats that they would otherwise lose. Scientists say that if we are going to stop the situation from getting any worse, if we are going to preserve the world as best we can and keep to this limit of 1.5 degrees, the world needs to stop doing so much of this, and it needs to do a lot more of this.
Green energy.
Half our energy by 2050 will need to come from renewable sources. Even then,
We
we'll
have
to
time,
plant
but we can-
millions of trees to soak up carbon dioxide and use machines like these to suck carbon from the air. The task is extremely urgent, and it's something that scientists all agree on. How much of this gets done, though, well, that's up to you and the governments that run countries around the world.
Nice video. So basically a good summary. Basically we have to act now, because if it goes above 1.5 centigrade, we are going to suffer like crazy. And this is by the end of this century, which I don't know if I'll be alive. Like if it's 2100, let's say, I'll be 102 years old, right? So hopefully technology by then will make us live a lot longer. But still, it would be twice as warm. So it could be around 3 centigrade hotter. And we're seeing the results of what happens when it's 1. So imagine 3 times this. 3 times this. Oh, dog. It would be terrible. It would be horrible. Anyways, let's keep reading. It is expected that this time the IPCC will also outline just how much... Oh. Let's see. Did I read this part? No. It is expected that this time the IPCC will outline just how much of an influence humans are having on the oceans, the atmosphere, other aspects of our planetary system. One of the most important questions concerns sea level rise. This has long been a controversial issue for the IPCC, with their previous projections scorned by some scientists as far too conservative. In the past, they've also been so reluctant to give a plausible upper limit on sea level rise, and we hope that finally comes around this time. I guess they don't want to cause a panic, which is a charitable interpretation, but I really hope they're not corrupt or something, where they're trying to downplay it so that, you know, corporations can keep being idiots, and Republicans and conservative people like that around the world can keep being stupid and keep their profits high, you know what I'm saying? As the world has experienced a series of devastating fires and floods in recent months that have been linked to climate change, the report will also include a new chapter linking extreme weather events to rising temperature. What is the IPCC? That's a good question. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a UN body set up in 1988 to assess the science around climate change. So 1988, they were already in a rumblings, you can say. The IPCC provides governments with scientific information they can use to develop policies on global heating. The first of its comprehensive assessment reports on climate change was released in 1992. The 6th in this series will be split into 4 volumes, the first of which, covering the physical science behind climate change, will be published on Monday. Further parts of the review will cover impacts and solutions. The summary has been approved in the process involving scientists and representatives of 195 countries. So let's look at this. Climate change have countries kept their promises? This is a good one because I really want to know, because talk is cheap, right? So let's see if people have actually, the governments have actually kept their promise. Now, oh, nice. These are a few more articles we can go through. It was all smiles in Paris in 2015, but have the countries fulfilled their climate promises? Let us find out. Oh, 1 viewer. That's nice. Agreed by 196 parties in the French capital in December 2015, the Paris Climate Deal aims to keep the rise in global temperatures this century well below 2 centigrade, above pre-industrial levels, and pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 centigrades. We look at 5 key countries and how well they've kept their promises. Every one of the signatories to the Paris Climate Agreement has to lodge a climate action plan with the UN to spell out what steps they're taking to curb carbon. Overall, according to a new assessment from the global consultancy Systemique, low carbon solutions have been more successful in this period than many people realize. The growth in coal for energy outside of China has declined significantly. Yes! We have to translate what we can do into what we will do. Lord Nicholas Stern from the London School of Economics, LSE. But a big part of that is understanding what is happening, and that's why I think this report is important. It will change people's perspectives of what is possible and translate that into action. So the big picture might be improving, but what about the individual nations? We have looked at how 5 key countries have lived up to their promises under the pact. The UK. As well as being the world's 5th largest economy, the UK is the incoming president of the Conference of Parties, or COP, the main UN climate negotiating forum, which will take place in Glasgow in November 2021. This global gathering of world leaders will try and work out how to improve the collective effort to tackle climate change and take the next steps. C0P26 in Glasgow will be the most important meeting since the Paris Climate Agreement was signed 5 years ago. The president of the meeting is a key influence on the success or failure of the event. Expanding offshore wind energy is key policy for UK's future climate targets. In Paris, 2015, French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius, I don't know I probably butchered his name, was seen as a hugely effective impartial leader who gained the trust of nations rich and poor. UK Business Secretary Alok Sharma has already been tasked with a job by Boris Johnson, but already there are worries that he has too much on his plate. Has the UK lived up to its promises? The answer is mostly yes. Since 2008, the UK government has had to set 5-year greenhouse gases targets by law, based on advice from the Independent Climate Change Committee, CCCC. Well, I would say the IPCC, but whatever. Targets set under the first 3 carbon budgets have been met. While it was part of the EU, the UK's target of 2020 reduction of 16% on 205 emissions. The UK easily achieved this. In fact, right now, Britain's total output of warming gases are down by 45% from 1990 levels. Good job, UK. Good job. As a result of leaving the EU, the UK has registered its own standalone plan to cut carbon with the UN. This is known as a Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC. It focuses on targets for 2030, which are meant to show the pathway to net zero emissions by 2050. Reaching net zero requires that any carbon emissions are balanced by absorbing an equivalent amount from the atmosphere, for example, planting trees. UK emissions projections, megatons of CO2 emissions per year, 800 historical emissions. Target for 20 and 2030. The UK will need to increase the rate of its reduction by around 50% to hit the new 2030 target. So maybe they won't. I don't know. I hope they do. I don't like Boris Johnson, but if he does it, I'll get my respect, for sure. Long-term pathway to zero emissions, 2020-2030. So they want to cut by a lot, about maybe about 300-ish megatons by 2020. And then another, what is it? 200? Sorry, another 300 to around 200 2030. Okay. Seems reasonable. The new 2030 plan released this 3rd December won plaudits for its ambition, but critics said there were major hurdles ahead. Under the NDC, around 87% of UK electricity would need to come from low carbon sources by the end of this decade, up from 50% now. That is really ambitious. That would require a lot of money and it would have to be incredibly fast to do it, like that fast by the end of the decade. I wonder if they can. Let's see. Almost half the cars on the road would need to be electric, up around 6% at present. Okay. I think that seems more manageable. As well as making major changes to transport, energy, and food emissions. The UK will have to take a tough stand internationally so that it doesn't simply substitute carbon cuts at home with emission-laden products from abroad. It is what you do at home, but it's also what you invest in internationally. Dr. Alison Doig from the from the Energy Climate Intelligence Unit, ECIU, told BBC News. The UK needs to ensure that with our export finance credits and with our Brexit deals that we are strongly signaling overseas what we're doing domestically. Nevertheless, in April 2021, the government announced that it would speed up emissions cutting plan. Boris Johnson said carbon release would be reduced by 78% by 2035, taking the country more than 3/4 of the way net zero. That seems really unrealistic. I would love for that to happen, but how do they do that? Because they even said that their other plan was very optimistic, like this one right here. And this is saying 78% by 2035. So like almost here, like like almost here by 2035. I don't know how they can do that. What do y'all think? I'm not sure. We'll see though. I hope they can do it, but let's see. I think it's just a bit of boasting on Boris's part, but let's see. Australia. Let's see how the kangaroo nation did it. Australia matters because not only is it one of the biggest sources of fossil fuels, it is also a country highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The nation is now the world's largest exporter of coal and gas according to a recent. Oh wow. Really? Wildfires in Australia were made worse by long-running drought. Yeah. Wildfires in Australia destroyed them. Emissions of greenhouse gases from Australian exports are responsible for 3.6% of global emissions according to research. Wow. That's a lot for one country to do. Globally, I mean. A country the size of Australia, I'm saying. On a per capita basis, including exports, Australians are responsible for 4 times as much CO2 as people living in the US. So it looks like Australia is a bad country when it comes to climate change. They need to be, they need to fix that. Politically, Australia is very important to the climate change terms as well. Over the past 5 years, it has moved further away from the majority of the nations of the UN, which have been urging rapid cuts in carbon. Prime Minister Scott Morrison was criticized by other politicians for downplaying the role of climate change after recent devastating wildfires. What did he say, I wonder? Black regions. Okay, so he kind of downplayed it. Okay. Which is a stupid thing to do. So has Australia lived up to its promises? Not really. Okay. While it hit a rather low 2020 target set under the previous global agreement, its actions under the Paris Climate Agreement are not measuring up according to experts. So it set a bad target and can't even hit that bad target. Alright. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison has been criticized for not taking climate change seriously. Australia set a target for 2030 of making 26 to 28% reduction in its emissions compared to 2005 levels. That's good. Projections published at the end of 2019 suggest Australia's emissions will only be 16% lower than 2005 levels in 2030. That's not enough. Come on, dog. You can do better than that. This year, UN's emissions gap report says that right now Australia is projected to fall short on what they should be a very easy target. So basically, they're not putting in the effort that they should be putting in. Because I'm guessing a lot of them, the government is conservative. This is just a guess. Maybe their conservatives are different, but based on what I've seen on our North American conservatives, this would be very right down their alley of doing this type of crap. 26% reduction needs to be at least double that to be in the Paris Climate Agreement pathway, says Dr. Bill Hare, who's part of the Climate Action Tracker, group of scientists who have rated Australia's plans as insufficient. There's very little going on whether you're talking about electric vehicles, motor vehicle standards. It is alone in the OECD in not having fuel efficiency standards. There's virtually nothing on energy efficiency and virtually nothing on building efficiency. Good job, Australia. You're really proving how trash you are when it comes to climate change. It's really an embarrassment, actually. Yeah, it is embarrassing. Come on. I thought you were supposed to be a developed nation and all that. There's a lot of focus on Australia now because of changing world politics. A dispute with China has threatened its exports of coal, while the result of recent US election has taken away a climate ally of Australian government. Really? When was this article? 21 April. So, not bad. Anyways, Australia emissions projections, megatons of CO2 per year. Is it going up? Oh, sorry, I'm yelling into the mic. I'm sorry, but Australia is projected to get closer to 2030 target after COVID caused big fall in emissions. So it's really COVID that got them down, not their own efforts. Bro, look at this chart, right? Look at this. Keep this in mind, everyone. Now let's look at UK's chart. See the difference? What's wrong with these the Australian government? What's wrong with them? What are they doing? I don't know how the people feel about this, but what's wrong with the government? They better step up. There needs to be some sort of penalties for countries that don't, do this climate change stuff. Like, because we can't just be like, oh, please do it, please. No, There needs to be consequences for not doing this. I don't know what they should be. They can figure that out in the summit, but they should be. There's even been some talk in recent weeks that the country might set a long-term net zero emissions goal. I mean, the way they're going now, I don't know how long that's gonna take. Maybe 2080 or something before by the time it's too late. Oh, my Flux app is kicking in. Give me a sec. Oh, where is it? Flux. Yep, working late. Sorry, my Flux app is something that helped me sleep. It cuts out white light at a certain point. It's pretty good. You all should try it if you all have sleep problems and you stay on the computer a lot. Anyways, let's get back to it. According to newspaper reports, Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison is set to announce that the country will no longer use carbon credits carried over from a previous international climate agreement. Australia had planned to use these questionable credits as a way of making up for the shortfall in its 2030 target. I think if Trump had won the election, then Australia would see themselves as a part of a gang with Brazil and Saudi Arabia and a few others. Dr. Alison Duong from EICU. Yeah, basically the idiot gang. Right, a bunch of far-right, sort of fascist people who, I don't know about Australia if it is, but the gang is, Brazil and Saudi Arabia, who want to, deny climate change and do all sorts of other insane stuff. But with the dawn of the Biden era, they know they're in a position that's becoming more outcast, so that might be why there's some softening on local language and the rhetoric. While action at the federal level in Australia might be slow, lower down there's a good deal of movement. Good to know. Our energy market operator said that for the power sector in Australia, we're looking at the fastest transition in the world. Okay. There's a light at the end of that tunnel. Good. Everyone knows that we are famous for our sunshine, our wind, our space. That means renewables are cheap and they're rapidly outcompeting coal and gas. And those technologies are going to be replaced very quickly. Good. Mobilize. The EU represents about a fifth of the world's economy and was responsible for 9% of the global shares of CO2 in 2019. The third largest emitter. Wow. Climate change is seen as a key issue for Europe because it's an international problem where acting together makes sense to many citizens. Europe's political leaders are also tackling climate as an important in showing the global relevance of the Union. An offshore wind farm in Germany. Good, we need to see more of these. During Trump administration, the EU stepped into a leadership role, attempting to build bridges with China on how to tackle the challenge. The EU is well regarded generally among developing countries and small island states because they're seen to want to push for greater ambition in terms of cutting carbon. In terms of building a global alliance of rich and poor countries, the EU is key. Has the EU lived up to its targets? Mostly yes. But back in 2007, EU leaders set a goal of cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 20% of the 1990 levels by 2020. By 2018, the collective efforts had cut warming gases by 23.2%. Hey, good job. This overachievement caused many to think that the initial targets have been set far too low. The EU subsequently announced a target of 40% for 2030, but this too came to be viewed as too easy to meet. I guess they should be a little bit more ambitious. Maybe they're setting the bar low so they don't have to cut that much. I mean, I guess maybe I'm being way too cynical. I could be. I hope they keep beating their expectations and keep cutting more than they actually, think they will. Better for all of us. The bloc has now adopted the aim of having carbon neutral economy by 2050 in line with the Paris Agreement. I think Trump pulled out of that stuff, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he pulled out of that, being the complete idiot that he is. Let's see. Hopefully my camera angle... Okay, my camera angle is good. Good. Okay. Let me see. Where was I? And in the European Green Deal, announced in September 2020, the European Commission proposed a new target for cuts around 55% by 2030. In April 2021, ahead of President Biden's Climate Leaders Summit, the EU adopted the goal. The European Parliament and many environmentalism have wanted them to go further and aim for 60% cut. But the proposal ran into too much trouble with the East European member states who argued this was way too much too soon. Yeah, I mean, some poorer countries going green will be difficult for them because they're so dependent on fossil fuels, right? But I think we can get there, if we help them. China. Not my favorite country, but hopefully they do cut the emissions. China is key to solving the global problem with climate change because it is the world's biggest contributor to the root cause, CO2 emissions. I mean, it has the world's biggest population. As China's economy rapidly expanded over the past 2 decades using coal as the main energy source, the emissions have overtaken the US and comprise around 28% of the global CO2 output. Oh my god, that is incredible. Like in a bad sense, that is incredible. Wow. But China is also the reason for the recent burst of optimism that has spread throughout the international community since September, when China's President Xi Jinping told the UN that his country would reach carbon neutrality by 2016. China's President Xi meets US President in 2019. He told it like Xi looks like he doesn't want to be there. He's like, God damn, I have to shake hands with this guy. Has China lived up to his promises? Answer is mostly yes, but with some caveats. Seeing itself as a developing country, China has always been reluctant to take on targets to cut carbon, arguing that the West should go first and farthest to rein in CO2. I mean, both of y'all should do it, not one or the other. Instead, China's focused on carbon intensity rather than cuts. That means limiting the amount of CO2 used per unit of economic activity. This is easier to achieve than outright emission reduction, but the downside is that the GDP increases, so does the overall total of carbon used. Before the Copenhagen Conference of the Parties meeting, COP in 2009, the China pledged to cut its carbon intensity by 40 to 45% compared to 2009 levels. Okay, so megatons of CO2 emissions. Is this supposed to be good in terms of going up? Right? Emissions per year, it seems to be going up. Maybe I'm reading this wrong, I don't know, but it looks like it's going up. But I guess they've stopped this sharp increase. I guess they're gonna go like this, like that, or something like that. At the end of 2017, China had cut carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP by 46% of the 2000 from the 2005 level. The Paris Agreement, China promised to cut carbon intensity by 60 to 65% and peak its emissions by 2030. The country remains on course to meet these goals. In fact, according to some, it could be made them years ahead of schedule. I think China took the conservative approach to the Paris Agreement. They only proposed something that they were very sure they could meet. Says Nicolas Hohen from Climate Action Tracker. I don't know if I pronounced his name right. It was also clear that at the moment when they proposed their 2030 target, they would overachieve it. And that doesn't mean that's a bad target per se, but that's just their way of approaching it. When President Xi Jinping told the UN in September that China would reach net zero in 2016 and peak its emissions well before 2030, the statement was welcomed all over the world. But observers said targets contained in the country's 5-year plan released in March 2021 could lead its emission to continuous increase. Giant solar farm in China. Good. A new Chinese national commitment is to be submitted to the UN in the run-up to Glasgow COP26 meeting. But there are significant challenges. The nature of peaking in the 2030 target can be only measured in a 100% certain way after the fact, said Dr. Shui Zhang from Dara World Environmental Research Center in Beijing. The 2016 neutrality goal is theoretically possible, could become unfeasible in reality if actions continuously delayed. From now, there are no leeways to accommodate coal any longer. Scientists examining a melting glacier in China. China will have to limit coal for energy, but not just inside the country, but outside as well. The financing of overseas coal power plants will have to wind down. Right now, the country's emissions have rebounded in the wake of pandemic as coal continues to burn brightly. But many remain optimistic that if China says it can do something, then it will get there. I mean, I don't know. Hopefully they will. I really hope they do. Because otherwise, it would be very bad. Because they're the number one emitter of CO2. The Philippines. The Philippines is one of the countries suffering the most from the impacts of climate change. I'm not surprised. They are very near the water. Yeah, right? The Philippines has suffered a bunch of islands, right? So it's really going to suffer. The Philippines has suffered serious impact from storms and typhoons. Yikes. Like many other developing economies, the country is very keen to use energy to bring up people out of poverty and raise living standards. In the past, Philippines has significantly increased investment in coal to foster development. Current approach seeks to move away from coal. The experts say the country could be a role model for many developing nations in similar situations. Has the Philippines lived up to its promise? Up until the Paris Agreement, the Philippines had not had any international requirements to curb its carbon. But in the Paris Pact, it committed to cut its emissions by 70% below business as usual by 2030. I don't know how the heck they're going to do that. According to Climate Action Tracker analysis, its actions to date are compatible with keeping its warming well below 2 centigrade this century. In 2019, around half the country's electricity came from coal, and plans in the pipeline would have more than doubled country's coal-fired capacity. But in October 2020, the government announced a moratorium on new coal plants, preferring instead to pursue a more mixed energy strategy. It's still going up, but I guess they're going to lower it. According to the Climate Action Tracker, this chart right here, this could curb emissions from the Philippines by 35% on top of their current policy projections by 2030. I think one of the most critical factors is that the market has been very important in the power sector, said Dr. Bill Hare. In other countries in Southeast Asia, we have what is called a political economy. Vested interests dominate in places such as Vietnam or Indonesia. But in the Philippines, the market has been really important in determining investments for quite some time, and I think that's what we're seeing unfolding. Multiplied by a government's predisposition now towards renewables, and the realization that as a very vulnerable country, they really need to be getting their act together. Unfortunately, it takes tragedy to wake people up, but I'm glad they've woken up and they're doing something about it now. The expectation of the observers that with the funding from the UN's Green Climate Fund and more focus on sustainability from international banks, the move away from fossil fuels in the Philippines in the long term will likely speed up. I hope so. The Philippines has not yet set a long-term goal, but it says it's committed to submitting a new national climate plan with enhanced targets. The country will also likely push for further action on concept known as loss and damage within the UN negotiation process. For developing nations, this means financial recompense. I can't speak today. English. Recompense for the impacts of climate change that cannot be avoided or adapted to. But richer countries are strongly resistant, believing that because they contributed the most to carbon emissions, they will be on the hook for compensation for centuries to come. Yeah, but you don't need as compensations as much, people. So, most of the countries, except Australia, have done incredibly well. And I hope China does more, but it seems a little sketchy. Like eliminating carbon intensity rather than carbon emissions, which means they reduce the carbon per capita, but they still have overall carbon emissions do go up. So, I don't know if that's as effective. So, hopefully they cut carbon emissions instead of doing that other stuff. But everybody else seems to be doing well, especially the UK. But Australia, they're bad people. In that sense, they're joining that group of absolute insane people like Brazil and Saudi Arabia, of people who want to deny climate change because they're very dependent on fossil fuel and the companies don't want to lose that money. Basically, so let's see if there are any other articles we can read. Okay, so this one seems a good one. Countries like the Maldives are among the most vulnerable to climate change. Climate change, at-risk nations fears extinction after IPCC report. Nations vulnerable to climate change have warned that they are on the edge of extinction if action is not taken. The warning by a group of developing countries come after a landmark UN report argued that global warming could make the parts of the world uninhabitable. Yeah, I think there'll be like climate refugees. And with that, it gets very ugly. Because the way our world is divided by tribalism such as race and culture, I don't know if that will go too well. I don't know how many countries will accept people of different races and cultures with open arms, realizing the fact that they're humans in need, and that's a good thing to do. I don't know. Especially the right-wing elements in the countries, they will not want that because they're evil. But hopefully I'm wrong. World leaders, including UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, have called the report a wake-up call to the world. But some of the strongest reactions to its findings have come from countries that are said to be the worst hit. We are paying for our lives from the carbon, someone else admitted, said Mohammed Nasheed, a former Maldives president, who represents almost 50 countries that are vulnerable to the effects of climate change. The Maldives is the world's lowest lying country. And Mr. Nasheed said the projections by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, would be devastating for the nation, putting it on the edge of extinction. Yeah. Any nations that are coastal, it's going to be really hard. According to the latest IPCC report, heat waves, heavy rainfall, droughts will become more common and extreme. The UN chief has labeled it as a code red for humanity. The report says it's unequivocal, I can't pronounce anything, evidence that humans are blamed to increasing temperatures. Within the next 2 decades, temperatures are likely to rise 1.5 centigrades above pre-industrial levels, it adds. We can't have that happening, sorry. We have to cut that stuff down. So we have, like, they said, what, 21 years? Or, sorry, 12 years or something. Like, within the next decade, we really have to make serious improvements. If we don't, we're in trouble. This is scary, really, really scary. Like, this is the survival of all of us, humans and others, other beings on this planet. It's something great, like out of a movie, like a apocalyptic movie or something, you know. In Kenya, rising water levels along the Great Rift Valley have forced thousands of people from their homes. Is this a video? Let me see if this is a video.
So the little rock that we're seeing here is this one here. This is the little rock, and the lump here is this one. The level is up to here.
Holy Jesus. Look at that, 30, 40 feet. Like he said here.
30, 40 feet.
That's scary. Lake Bogora, a few kilometers south. It was fresh, providing drinking water to vast numbers of people. Bogora is salty, home to a famous colony of flamingos. Okay. Both have risen to an alarming levels. Yeah, look at that, houses underwater. If they contaminate each other, it would be a disaster, okay?
If Lake Bogoria starts flowing into Lake Baringo, what will be the outcome of that? Because Bogoria is a highly alkaline lake, and it will be an ecological...
So it won't mix well, okay.
Once that water reaches Lake Baringo, it will affect the fish, it will affect the bird life, it will affect the aquatic life. And that is serious.
That's so sad. How many people have lost their homes?
Sisi tangu tusaliwe hatujawahi kuona maji kiwango hii. Kwa majina ni Dickson Lenasolia, ishi hapa kwa muda yangu yote tangu kusaliwa. Haina mbinu ya kuweza kuzuia. Tulijaribu mbeleni tukifikiria tunaweza kufunga.
Okay.
Lakini hakuna. Maji ya bahari yanaongezeka usiku na mchana. Mpaka ikachukua mashamba zote tukahama. Baba zetu walikuwa wanaishi hapa. Mababu zetu walikuwa wanaishi hapa. Kwa hivyo saa hii ya
that's sad.
Kama itarudi kwa sababu imekuja kwa kiwango cha juu sana. Wakati yote ilikuwa inakuja na si kwa kiwango hii ya wakati huu sasa.
This is where they used to live, so they have to... Oh my god, drink water. Deep, okay. Silt. Yeah. Which is gonna hurt the economy, which hurts people. Which is the middle class and the poor people.
Was once dry land on which a community once thrived. This was a fisheries department, and just beyond there was a health center. This was a thriving community. There were homes, there were farms, there were schools, and there were hospitals. Much of that has now been drowned in water.
What a loss.
Majina yangu ni Emily Ombaso. Manas. Tangu hii maji imekuwa flooded hivi
yeah, because they can't go through the water.
Kwa wengine they can.
Yeah, because you gotta get a boat.
Transport ya kufika hapa wanaogopa kupita ndani ya maji kwa sababu wanaweza kutana.
Oh, I completely forgot about crocodiles. Yeah, no shit. People have to risk that now. Ray. Okay.
As the people move away from the lake and away from their flooded farms and so on, they have to go to somewhere. And they're now starting to encroach on...
Yeah, there's going to be violence and conflict.
You've got an additional pressure for grazing and an additional pressure for building. And the end result of that, unfortunately, is going to be conflict.
So, Kenya is being hard hit by this, unfortunately. Any country that is like anywhere near water, anybody near any sort of water is going to have serious issues because of the rising sea levels. This could lead to sea levels rising by half a meter. A rise of 2 meters of the century cannot be ruled out at the end of the century. Okay, that's too much water. It might not sound like much, but trust me, we are going to be seriously affected by that. So many countries, like cities, would be completely like uninhabitable. So many climate refugees. There'll be so much violence and conflict because fighting over land. Damn. If we really want to survive this and get better, not only do we have to make the world more democratic, more socialist, in my opinion, more fair and free, freedom and equality and, you know, things like that. Not just for North America, but for the whole world. Because that way we can deal with crises like this really well. But this crises expose the weaknesses of our systems. And I think climate change and COVID especially, and now climate change, are exposing all the weaknesses. No one can deny this anymore. Otherwise, people could propagandize and kind of, you know, avoid the thing because it's not in your face. But now it's in your face. It's staring in you, right in the eyes. So you gotta admit that it's there now. Oh, I hope we can do something about it globally. Okay, so 2 meters by the end of the century can't be ruled out. That could have a devastating impact on low-lying coastal areas, said Diane Black Lion, ambassador of Antigua and Barbuda. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And lead climate negotiator for the Alliance of Small Island States. Yeah, islands are the biggest trouble. That is our future right there, our very future right there, Miss Black Lion said. This report comes from less than 3 months before a key climate change in Glasgow known as COP26. Boris Johnson is hosting the conference, said the report showed help was needed for countries bearing the brunt of climate change. Today's report makes for a sobering reading, and it is clear that the next decade is going to be pivotal to securing the future of our planet, he said. We know what must be done to limit global warming, consign coal to history, and shift to clean energy sources, protect nature and provide climate finance for countries on the front line. Okay, Boris, I like you there. Yeah, I like that. I don't know how British conservatives are compared to American conservatives. I'm guessing they're more sane, although that's not really saying that much. Because our conservatives are more sane, but they're still insane, you know? The Canadian ones. Hopefully your British ones are better for y'all. Anyways, average rise in sea level relative to 1900. Observes the rise in sea level. Future based on sustainability. Different possible scenarios. Future with intensive fossil fuels. Yeah, so 0.5 meters. It could go to 1 meter. Oh my god. Unlikely, but with high impact rise under a future with intensive fossil fuel use, including ice shield instability. Yeah, if this is, we're done. Either we evolve into fish very quickly, or we are completely finished. The latter is 100% likely to happen. The former, nah. So hopefully future based on sustainability, the little dark green line here, if y'all can't see it. Hopefully that can work. So hopefully before I die, climate change is not going to destroy everything. Under the 2015 Paris Agreements, more than 190 governments agreed that the world should limit global warming to 2 centigrades, ideally 1.5 centigrades above pre-industrial levels. But the new report says under all scenarios, both targets will be broken this century unless huge cuts in carbon take place. Like the previous article we saw, a lot of countries are saying that they will, but that's 5 countries. But we have idiot countries like Brazil and Saudi Arabia and apparently Australia who are not following that, and they could screw us over. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry said that to reach the targets, countries urgently need to change their economies. This is the critical decade for action, and COP26 in Glasgow must be a turning point in the crisis, Mr. Kerry said. Climate activist Greta Thunberg, who's confirmed on Monday that she will attend the COP26 talks, said the report confirms what we already know, that we are in an emergency. I saw that on Twitter. We can still avoid the worst consequences, but not if we continue like today and not with treating the crisis like a crisis, she said on Twitter. Yeah, there's hope, but there's also danger. So we have to take this seriously. I'm very, very excited for this conference. I will definitely cover it on Twitch and post it on YouTube for sure, because this is maybe the most important conference, one of the most at least, in my lifetime, and our lifetimes, I would say. Alright, let's see if there's any other articles. 5 things we've learned from the IPCC report. Oh, Climate change is widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and it's down to us. For those who live in the West, the dangers of warming our planet are no longer something distant, impacting people in faraway places. Climate change is not a problem of the future, it is here and now and affecting every region in the world, said Dr. Friedrich Otto from the University of Oxford, and one of many authors on the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change IPCC report. It is the confidence of the assertions that the scientists are now making that is the real strength of this new publication. Oh, let's look at the image. I completely forgot about the image. Satellite images of wildfires in Evia, Greece. Yeah, that looks bad. It looks really, really bad. Okay. The phrase very likely appears 42 times in the 40-odd pages of the summary for policymakers. In scientific terms, that's a 90 to 100% certain that something is real. Yeah, so basically, it is real. Extreme heat becomes more frequent. Projected increase in the frequency and intensity of high temperatures, which occurred only once in every 10 years on average in a climate without human influence. Frequency every year. 10 years. 1850 to 1900. Okay. Once every 10 years. Now locally to occur 2.8 times. Present 1 point centigrade warmer. 1.5 centigrade warming. Likely to occur 4.1 times. 2 centigrade warming. Likely to occur 5.6 times. 4 centigrade warming. Likely to occur 9.4 times. So we have to keep it below this, around here, hopefully. If we don't, well, a lot of people are going to die. Increase in intensity, 1850 to 1900. Present, 1 centigrade warmer, 1.2 centigrade warmer. 1.5 centigrade warming, 1.9 centigrade hotter. 2 centigrade warming, 2.6 centigrade hotter. 4 centigrade warming, 5.16 centigrade hotter. Future global warming. Yeah, so we cannot let it get past this point. This is the cutoff point. This is the cap. If we get beyond this, we are in serious, serious trouble. Millions, maybe a billion or more could die. A lot of people could die. I think there's not one single kind of new surprise that comes out. It is the overarching solidness that makes the strongest IPCC report ever made. Professor Arthur Peterson from University College London, UCL, told BBC News. Professor Peterson is a former Dutch government representative at the IPCC and was an observer at the approval session that produced this report. It is understated, it is cool, it is not accusing, it's just bang, 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 one clear point after the other. The clearest of these points is about the responsibility of humanity for climate change. There's no longer equating, it's us. Equivocating, it's us. More than 100 people were killed in floods that ravaged parts of Europe in July 2021. I think I covered this in a video. One of my first videos was this. I think my first video was this. Okay. Before I go on, let's see if anyone's watching. No one's watching. Rip. Anyways, that's okay. I'll post this on YouTube anyways. 1.5 centigrade temperature limit is on life support. When the last IPCC report on the science of climate change was published in 2013, the idea of 1.5 centigrade being the safe global limit was barely considered. But in the political negotiation leading up to the planet's climate change in 2015, many developing countries and island states pushed for this lower temperature limit, arguing it was a matter of survival for them. A special report on 1.5 centigrade in 2018 showed that the advantages of staying under the limit were massive compared to a 2 centigrade world. Getting there would require carbon emissions to be cut half essentially by 2030 and net zero emissions reached by 2050. Otherwise, the limit would be reached between 2030 and 2052. The new report reaffirms this finding. Under all scenarios, the threshold is reached by 2040. If emissions aren't reined in, 1.5 centigrade could be gone in around a decade. Wow. Abandoned canoes in the cracked, dried up shores of Lake Chilwa, Malawi. Oh my god, look at this. Dry. This is the future if we don't do anything. Reaching net zero involves in reducing greenhouse gas emissions as much as possible using clean technology, then absorbing any remaining ones by, for example, planting trees. While the situation is very serious, it is not a sudden drop into calamity. The 1.5 centigrade threshold is an important threshold politically, of course, but from a climate point of view, it is not a cliff edge. Once we go to 5 centigrade, then everything will become very catastrophic, explained Dr. Amanda Maycock. Oh, that's a funny last name. Sorry, Amanda. From the University of Leeds, and one of the authors of the new report. The very low emission scenario that we assess in the report shows that warming levels does stabilize around or below 1.5 centigrade later on in the century. If that pathway was the one we could follow, then the impacts would be significantly avoided. How much hotter could it get? Changes in average global temperature relative to 1850 to 1900, showing observed temperatures and future simulations. Observed temperatures. Look, 1 centigrade. Future with intensive fossil use. Boom. Almost 5. Different scenarios. Future based on sustainability. It'll go down. We need to do one of the two. Green or purple. We can't do dark purple. We can't do light blue or light purple or orange here. No way. Has to go down. The bad news, no matter what we do, the seas will continue to rise. In the past, the IPCC has been criticized for being way too conservative when it comes to assessing the risk of sea level rise. Like a clear research saw, previous reports exclude the potential impacts of the melting of the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets. Not this time. The report shows under the current scenarios that the sea levels could rise above the likely range, going up to 2 meters by the end of the century and by 5 meters by 2150. While these are unlikely figures, they can't be ruled out under a very high greenhouse gas emission scenario. That's bad enough. But even if we get a handle on emissions and keep temperatures around 1.5 centigrade by 2100, the waters will continue to rise into the future. So we can control the heat, we can control maybe crazy weather events happening if we keep it below 1.5 centigrade. But this rising sea levels are going to continue to happen because the heat, I think, is trapped in the ocean. It's already done. We can't do much about it. All we can do is to make sure that everything else is okay. But even then, we're going to feel this pretty harshly, everyone. We're still going to feel, because especially people like me who live on coastal cities, but I live in a first world country. We're talking about other people who live in like third world countries or poorer countries or live on islands who will be in huge problems. Their whole country could just disappear. Where are they going to go? Right? You can't just do the Ben Shapiro thing. Well, just move, bro. Move. You know? That's what Ben Shapiro said as a reaction to people having to move to climate change. Oh, just go buy another house. What a goddamn idiot he is. They're going to have to be refugees, and we know that's going to cause a lot of issues because we're divided by race and culture, religion, many other things. And that's going to cause a lot of conflict and a lot of death, I think, unfortunately. So which is why we really need to change the way we govern ourselves. The way we are governed, we need to change it. Democracy, of course, and freedom, but also equality. And I believe that can be achieved under socialism. So we've already seen this. The gorilla that looms large in the background is the very scary sea level rising in numbers in the long term. Professional Matt Meinshausen, oh god, I probably butchered that name, from the University of Melbourne and an IPCC author. And the paper shows that even with 1.5 centigrade warming, we're looking at the long terms of 2 to 3 meters. That is crazy. And under the high scenarios, we could looking at multi-meter sea levels rise by 2150. That is just scary because it may not be the end of our lifetime, but it's around the corner. It will be committing this planet to a big legacy. Even if the sea level rise is relatively mild, it will have knock-on effects we cannot avoid. With the gradual sea level rise, those extreme sea levels events that have occurred in the past, just once per century, will occur more and more frequently in the future, said Valerie Masson-Delmotte, co-chair of the IPCC working group that prepared the new report. Those that occurred only once per century in the past, our report occurred once or twice per decade by mid-century. The information we provide in this report is extremely important to take into account and prepare for these events. Wow. So sea levels, I think, is probably going to be the biggest problem even if we get everything under control. Good news. Scientists are more certain about what. The warnings are clearer and more dire, but there's an important thread of hope running through this report. Scientists have long been worried that the climate could be more sensitive to carbon dioxide than they thought. They use a phrase, equilibrium climate sensitivity, to capture the range of warming that curve CO2 levels were doubled. An infrared camera captures what appears to be methane appearing from a natural gas facility. Oh, that doesn't sound good. Or look good. In the latest report in 2013, this ranged from 1.5 centigrade to 4.5 centigrade, with no best estimate. This time around, the range is narrowed and the authors opt for 3 centigrade as their most likely figure. Why is this important? We are now able to constrain that within a good degree of certainty. Then we employ that to really make far more... This sentence is kind of built weird. Okay, we are now able to constrain that with a good degree of certainty, and then we employ that to really make far more accurate predictions. Okay, I guess they're talking about this. That's just me being stupid. Said Prof. Piers Forster from the University of Leeds, an author on the report. So that way we know the net zero will really deliver. Increase in extreme rainfall. This is very important too, because we just saw that video in Kenya, remember? About the water levels rising and completely destroying people's homes and lives. Projected increase in frequency and intensity of heavy rainfall in one day, which occurred only once in every 10 years on average in climate without human influence. Frequency every 10 years. 1850 to 1900, once every 10 years. Present, 1 centigrade or warmer, now likely to occur 1.3 times more. So around this, a little bit more, I guess, but not good. Even a little bit more is bad. 1.5 centigrade warming, likely to occur 1.5 times. Not great. 2 centigrade warming, likely to occur 1.7 times. Very bad. And 4 centigrade warming, we're basically all dead, I think, at this point. Likely to occur 2.7 times. Increase in intensity of the rain. 1850, 1900, 0. Present, 1 centigrade warmer, 6.7% wetter. Look at this weather thing. It's way more intense. Even though the amounts of the amount of times it occurs doesn't increase that much. It's still bad. The percentage seems worse. 1.5 centigrade warming, 10.5% wetter. 2 centigrade warming, 14% wetter. It goes from 4-ish, 4, then boom, to 30, man. Damn. It goes like 16%. 4 centigrade warming, 30.2% wetter. That's bad. Another big surprise in the report is the role of methane, another warming gas. According to the IPCC, around 0.3 centigrade of the 1.1 centigrade that the world has already warned comes from methane. Yeah, that's kind of surprising because I don't hear methane talked about that much. Have you all heard it? Because from what I've heard, it's always been CO2, 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 and greenhouse gas. Gases. I guess methane is one of those. Tackling those emissions from the oil and gas industry, agriculture, rice cultivation could be a big win in the short term. Good. The report quashes any remaining debate about the urgent need for slash methane pollution, especially from sectors such as oil and gas, where the available reductions are the fastest and cheapest, said Fred Krupp from the US Environmental Defense Fund. When it comes to our overheating planet, every fraction of a degree matters, and there is no faster, more achievable way to slow the rate of warming than by cutting human-caused methane emissions. Politicians will be nervous, the courts will be busy. Yeah. The timing of this report coming in a couple of months before the critical C0P26 climate conference in Glasgow mean that it will likely be the bedrock of the negotiation. The IPCC has some form here. Their previous assessment in 2013-2014 paved the way for Paris climate change agreement. I hope they come up with some other great stuff here too, because that climate change agreement is so good. And I think we need more emission cutting, we need more methane cutting, we need more discussion and how to deal with these problems and how to help countries that are on the front line of this, and how to deal with climate refugees that will inevitably come, and places to house them and feed them and shelter and educate. You know, we as a species need to become together. You know what I mean? Become more united. Okay. This new study is far stronger and clearer, more confident about what will happen if politicians don't act. If they don't act quickly enough and COP26 ends in an unsatisfactory fudge, then the courts might become more involved. I hope that this conference goes well. How the world could get warmer. Projected annual average temperatures changing relative to 1850 to 1900. Different levels of global warming. At 1 centigrade global warming, at 1.5 centigrade global warming, at 2 centigrade global warming, at 4 centigrade global warming. Oh my god, look at this. This looks like a freaking tomato. No. We gotta keep it like here. Nowhere here. Here. 1.5, 1 centigrade. 1.5, 1 centigrade. That's what we gotta keep it at. In recent years, in Ireland and the Netherlands, environmental campaigners have successfully gone to court to force governments and companies to act on the science of climate change. We are not going to let this report be shelved by further inaction. Instead, we will be taking it with us to the court, said Kaisa Konsonen, senior political advisor at Greenpeace Nordic. By strengthening the scientific evidence between human emissions and extreme weather, the IPCC has provided new and powerful means for everyone everywhere to hold the fossil fuel industry and governments directly responsible for the climate emergency. Good. One only needs to look at the recent court victories secured by the NGOs against Shell to realize how powerful IPCC science can be. Whew. So, I think we have covered all we needed to cover on climate change. I hope you all have enjoyed it. And for those of you watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and hit the bell button if you all want to know when I'm going to post videos like this. Subscribe to my Twitch. That way you can catch me live. And the links are in the description box below. My Twitter link is also there. And I will post the link also in the comment sections. Maybe I will. That might be too much. I will actually. I will do that. Alright. See y'all in the next one.